Imagine sitting alone in a concrete box the size of a parking space. No voices, no sunlight, no real human contact. Just the sound of a steel food slot opening and a tray sliding through. Now imagine this. One morning in ADX Florence, the prison known as the Alcatraz of the Rockies, an inmate refused his meal for the 29th day in a row. Not because he wanted to die, not because he was sick, but because he said the food in ADX Florence was punishment inside punishment. The guards didn't argue. They didn't speak. They simply documented it and moved on, standard procedure. But the inmates stayed on the floor, staring at the untouched tray. Cold beans, a dry patty, 2 slices of bread, a packet of fruit drink powder. He whispered, "How is a man supposed to survive on this?" This wasn't the first time an inmate inside ADX Florence went to extremes because of the food. Federal lawsuits, medical reports, and former prisoners all described the same thing. Meals in ADX Florence weren't just meals. They were part of the struggle to keep your mind alive. And on that day, the hunger strike reached a point where prison medical staff had to make a decision that could change everything. But how did it get to this moment? How can prison food push a man to the edge? And why is the world's most secure prison serving meals that have sparked complaints for more than 20 years? To understand that, we need to go back to where the story really begins. Before the hunger strike, before the tray that sparked attention, the story starts with how ADX Florence handles food. ADX opened in 1994, built to house the most dangerous inmates in America, terrorists, gang leaders, and prisoners who attacked staff elsewhere. Every part of the prison is designed for control, including the meals. Food is delivered through a small slot in the cell door. Inmates eat alone. They cannot choose their meals. They cannot touch kitchen equipment. The standard daily meals are simple and portion-controlled: a meat or soy patty, beans, rice or pasta, a piece of fruit, bread, and a powder drink packet. A federal judge once described ADX meals as basic but nutritionally adequate. But inmates say something different. And that difference led to the moment we started with, a hunger strike that forced the prison to act. But before the strike, something else was happening. Because the meals at ADX Florence are more than just food. They are a tool for order, for compliance, and sometimes for consequences. ADX Florence, like many federal prisons, uses something called nutritional loaf, also known as disciplinary loaf. It's a dense block made of vegetables, beans, bread, sometimes powdered milk and rice, all baked together into a single brick. It is legal and meant to be nutritionally complete. But inmates have described it as a brick of punishment, dry as dust, and barely edible. At ADX, the loaf was used only for disciplinary reasons. Multiple lawsuits claimed the loaf was given in ways that caused extreme distress. Some inmates said they would rather starve than eat it. And some did. This is where the tension started rising. Meal after meal, day after day, the food wasn't just a routine, it was becoming a battlefield. And then, one inmate decided he had reached his limit. This was the beginning of the hunger strike. And the event that came next shocked even the staff inside ADX. The inmate collapsed in his cell. After days of refusing meals, his body finally gave up. Guards hit the alarm. Footsteps echoed down the empty hallway. A medical and security team rushed in, moving fast but controlled. The door was opened. A stretcher was brought in. Vitals were checked. And suddenly, the food he refused became the least of their worries. Because now, it was a medical crisis. But this collapse didn't begin that morning. It started long before, in the slow, grinding routine of ADX Florence meals. At ADX, meals come the same way every day: fast, silent, controlled. A slot opens, a tray slides in, a slot closes. For inmates locked alone 23 hours a day, the food becomes the only break in the day, the only thing that changes, the only thing that connects them to time. So when a prisoner refuses a tray, it sends a message that staff takes seriously, because meal refusal can be the first sign of a mental crisis, desperation, or protest. And inside ADX, hunger strikes are not uncommon. Every single refused tray must be logged. But that morning, the log changed from refused meal to medical emergency. Because what happens next is one of the most controversial policies in the entire federal prison system. When a hunger strike reaches a dangerous point, the Bureau of Prisons must make a choice. If an inmate's life is at risk, medical staff can step in. Sometimes, the inmate is put under medical observation, or, if absolutely necessary, fed through medical intervention. This practice has led to a nationwide debate. Some say it saves lives. Others say it takes away a man's last form of protest. So when the inmate collapsed, the staff at ADX faced the same question. Do they let the hunger strike continue, or do they intervene? Inside that medical room, the decision was made. But as the team prepared for intervention, the inmate suddenly regained consciousness, confused, weak, and unable to stand, but still refusing the meal placed beside him. This moment would ignite the next stage of the standoff between the inmate and the meals of the world's most secure prison. When the inmate opened his eyes in the medical room, he didn't speak. He didn't ask where he was. He didn't look at the officers or the staff standing around him. His eyes went straight to the tray placed a few feet away. Beans, bread, a small piece of fruit. The same meal he had been refusing for almost a month. In many U.S. federal prisons, including ADX, hunger strikers often wake up confused. Their bodies are weak. Their vision is blurry. Their heartbeat is slow. But there is one thing many of them hold on to: their refusal, their protest, their message. And that morning, even after collapsing, this inmate kept his protest alive. He turned his face away from the tray. A nurse noted his condition. A guard logged the refusal. And the standoff officially began. Because once a hunger striker reaches a medical crisis, the prison can't simply ignore it. Every hour becomes controlled. Every meal becomes a question. Do they intervene, or do they let the protest continue? The medical area inside ADX Florence is nothing like a normal hospital. It is small, heavily monitored, and built with the same strict control as the rest of the facility. Cameras, secure doors, limited movement. Everything is recorded. For hunger strike cases, federal regulations require regular medical checks, hydration monitoring, weight tracking, and mental health evaluations. Staff must document every single refused tray. These procedures are written in Bureau of Prisons policy, not rumors, and the staff followed them step by step. But as the hours passed, the inmate's condition stayed the same: weak, silent, refusing food, refusing drink. Hunger strikes inside federal prisons often follow this dangerous calm, where the body is failing, but the mind is still locked on the protest. And this is usually when the pressure begins. Not physical pressure, that is not allowed, but the psychological pressure from the reality of the situation. The body can't continue, but the inmate won't stop. This is where the lows begin, the slow, painful waiting that comes before the next extreme moment. Hours turned into a full day. A full day turned into two. Throughout federal prisons, hunger strikes can last days, weeks, or even months. During this stage, meals keep coming, even if the inmate never touches them. Every tray is placed down. Every refusal is recorded. Every hour is monitored. Inside ADX Florence, the food delivery method doesn't change just because the inmate is in medical care. He still receives a tray, a drink, a documented meal. Whether he eats it or not determines what happens next. The medical staff knew the danger signs: dizziness, blackouts, a rapid heartbeat, a sharp decline in weight. And they saw them beginning to appear. But the inmate still refused to speak, eat, or drink. This slow decline, this cold waiting, is one of the hardest parts of any hunger strike inside a Supermax. The staff can't force him to talk, and he refuses to give in. Something had to change. And it did. But not the way anyone expected. Because on the morning of the third day, a new tray arrived. And for the first time in weeks, the food was different. This was not a normal ADX meal. It was something used only in special situations across the federal system. Something rarely given. Something controversial. Something inmates often describe as the final test. The tray contained nutritional loaf, the dense, punishment-style meal used in federal prisons under certain conditions. When the inmate saw it, he didn't stay silent anymore. He reacted, and that reaction would escalate the situation to a whole new level. When that new tray slid across the floor, the air in the medical observation room changed. It was a single, dense block. Nutritional loaf. In the federal prison system, this loaf has appeared in disciplinary cases, segregation units, and situations where meals must be simplified for security. The Bureau of Prisons has confirmed its use, and former ADX inmates have reported receiving it. It is legal and recognized, but it is also one of the most debated items ever served in a U.S. prison. The inmate looked at it, really looked at it. For weeks, he had refused food in silence. But this meal triggered something different. He sat up on the bed, weak but alert, and stared at the tray with a mixture of anger and disbelief. For the first time, he spoke. His voice was hoarse, barely a whisper. "I'm not eating that." And with those 4 words, the tension rose sharply. The staff knew, when an inmate refuses the loaf, the situation is reaching a new level. The loaf isn't given casually. In federal guidelines, it's described as a nutritionally complete meal alternative. Its purpose is to prevent contraband and standardize food in high-risk situations. But inmates have described it as too dry to swallow and barely food. Seeing it on the tray told the inmate one thing: the prison was escalating. And protests inside ADX rarely stay calm when escalation begins. As medical staff observed him, the inmate pushed the tray away, slowly, but with clear intent. A guard documented it. A nurse checked his vitals again, but he gave no eye contact. His body was clearly weakening, heart rate unstable, muscles trembling, vision fading. But mentally, he was holding firm. This is a common pattern. When the body weakens, the resolve often strengthens. The strike was entering its critical stage, where medical intervention becomes more likely. Hours passed. The loaf remained untouched. The inmate barely moved. But then, later that evening, 3 officers and a medical staff member returned to his room. This wasn't a routine check. This was something else. They spoke quietly, following federal guidelines for a prisoner in medical danger. The inmate watched them, breathing slowly. Then, one officer stepped forward and informed him a serious medical evaluation had been ordered. He would be moved, escorted, examined. This wasn't a threat. It was policy. But to him, it meant the protest was no longer just between him and the tray. Now, the Bureau of Prisons itself was stepping in. And this is where the tension exploded. Because when the officers opened the door to prepare the move, the inmate suddenly tried to stand and collapsed again, hitting the floor hard. His body could not support him anymore. He fell before the officers could reach him. And the room shifted from controlled procedure to emergency action all over again. The day started like any other inside ADX Florence. Miguel woke up to the sound of the metal slot opening as a guard delivered his breakfast: oatmeal, boiled egg, 2 slices of bread. Nothing special, just another cold morning in the world's toughest prison. He sat on his bunk, eating slowly. But today was different. He had been approved for a 10-minute monitored phone call, his first one in 6 months. He spent the morning rehearsing what he would say to his mother. He just wanted to tell her he was okay, to let her hear his voice. For once, the day didn't feel heavy. Just after noon, Officer Hensley came by Miguel's cell. "Ramirez, shower rotation in 5 minutes." Nothing unusual. Showers were part of the daily schedule. But as Miguel followed the escort team down the hallway, he noticed something strange. The officers weren't talking. Normally they joked or complained. Today, they walked stiff and silent. Miguel brushed it off. Maybe it was nothing. He stepped into shower cage 14, and the guards locked him in. The water flowed, then shut off. Standard procedure. Still normal. But then, he waited. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. Then 15. This never happened. ADX runs like a machine, scheduled down to the second. Miguel called out, "I'm done. You forgetting me?" No answer. He stood there, dripping water, the air cold on his skin. Something felt very wrong. Finally, 2 new guards walked toward him, carrying clipboards. One spoke without emotion. "Ramirez, your scheduled phone call for today has been canceled." Miguel blinked. "Canceled? No reason?" "Canceled why?" he asked, his voice tighter than he meant. The guard flipped a paper. "Security review. Your breakfast tray tested positive for tampering." Miguel froze. His breakfast? The same meal he ate hours ago? "I didn't do anything to the tray," but the guard was already shaking his head. "You'll be informed after the investigation." Miguel's stomach dropped. Something invisible was happening around him. Officer Hensley finally appeared, holding a brown paper meal bag marked with red tape. Red tape meant special administrative review. Serious. Hensley placed the bag on the floor outside the cage. Miguel reached through the bars, pulled it closer, and opened it. Inside was his normal breakfast. But on top of the oatmeal sat a folded note. It could only have come from an inmate working in the kitchen. Miguel unfolded it. For words, in small, shaky handwriting. "Stop talking about the kitchen." Miguel's hands tightened around the note. He hadn't talked to anyone about the kitchen. How did someone know he was asking questions? And who was threatening him inside a Supermax? Before he could think, a loud alarm exploded across the block. Tier lockdown. The guards sprinted toward him. Ramirez, hands behind your back. Confused, heart hammering, he turned. As they cuffed him, Miguel saw movement far down the tier. An inmate he had never spoken to was staring at him through his food slot, slowly lifting one finger and pressing it against his lips. A silent warning, keep quiet. The next morning, the air in ADX Florence felt slow and heavy. Miguel sat on his concrete bunk, holding a new, tiny folded paper that had mysteriously appeared. On it was a name, L. Forson, Syrange. He didn't know who gave it to him, or why someone would risk punishment to warn him. For 2 hours, nothing happened. Just the usual clanking doors and squeaking food carts. Miguel almost convinced himself it was all in his head. When lunchtime came, a guard pushed a tray through the slot. Beans, bread, an apple, a carton of milk. Everything looked normal. But Miguel noticed the tray wasn't warm. It felt like it had been sitting somewhere, waiting. He looked closer. The milk carton had a small pencil mark on the side, a tiny X. He'd never seen that before. He pushed the tray back. "Officer," he called out. "I think this tray." The guard cut him off. "Eat. Don't ask questions. Don't look for trouble." His tone wasn't angry. It was nervous. Why would a guard be nervous about a lunch tray? Hours passed. Miguel didn't touch the food. Then he heard it. Tap, tap, tap. The sound came from the vent above his sink. A slow, deliberate pattern. Miguel stood on his steel toilet to get closer. "Who is this?" he whispered. The vent went silent. Then a single word traveled through the metal, so soft it barely existed. Syrange. Miguel froze. Syrange. The location from the note. Where Forson was kept. "Who are you?" Miguel asked. No answer. Just one more whispered message. "Don't drink the milk." Before Miguel could ask why, the vent went silent for good. He sat on his bunk, staring at the milk carton marked with an X. Was it a test? A threat? A message? He didn't know. Just as he reached for the tray to push it away, boom. A loud crash shook the entire tier. 2 guards sprinted past his cell. Another guard yelled, "Emergency in C range. Inmate Forson is refusing orders. Full tactical response." Miguel stood up instantly. Forson, the name from the note. Something was happening. But then he heard something that made his blood run cold. Through the echo of slamming steel doors, someone shouted down the unit, "Find Miguel Ramirez now." The voice was sharp, panicked, urgent. Miguel stepped back from his door as 3 guards ran straight toward his cell. Something had happened in C range, and now they were coming for him. 3 officers stormed toward Miguel's cell, boots pounding against the concrete floor. Miguel backed up until his shoulders pressed against the cold wall. He didn't know what happened in C range, and he didn't know why they were shouting his name. But he knew one thing. This wasn't normal ADX procedure. The lead officer stopped at his door and barked, "Ramirez, stand at the back wall." Hands visible. Miguel raised his hands slowly. "Sir, what did I do?" No one answered. The food slot opened with a loud clang. "Cuff up." Miguel placed his hands through the slot. Cuffs snapped tight. The door rolled open slowly, an event that usually required a supervisor. Today, the guards didn't wait. 2 officers grabbed his arms. "Escort to C range," one muttered. C range. The same place mentioned on the note. The same place the voice whispered through the vent. The same unit where an inmate named Forson was causing a disturbance. Miguel's heart pounded in his ears. They marched him down the long concrete hallway. Red lights were flashing, signaling a code incident somewhere in the building. Someone had refused orders, or covered their cell window, or tried to harm themselves. And now, Miguel was being walked straight toward it. The guards didn't explain anything. Their faces were tense. One of them spoke under his breath. Why would he be asking for Ramirez? He doesn't even know him. Another guard hissed, "Shut up, don't say his name." Miguel swallowed. Who was he? Forson? The inmate everyone was whispering about? The escort team stopped at a thick metal door marked C range, restricted access. A supervisor looked Miguel over. "Is this Ramirez?" "Yes, sir." The supervisor nodded, then said something Miguel didn't expect. "We need him to identify something." Before Miguel could ask, the door buzzed open. The sound that came from inside made his skin crawl. A deep, angry voice yelling from down the range. "Bring him here. Right now." Miguel froze. The voice wasn't an officer's. It was coming from an inmate cell. The guards tightened their grip on him. "Move it." They walked him deeper into C range. The air felt hotter here, heavy. As they passed cell C-12, Miguel saw a hand reaching out from the food slot, tattooed and shaking. The inmate inside was pacing like a caged animal. Suddenly, the voice exploded again. Miguel Ramirez. Look at me. Every guard stiffened. Keep moving, one ordered. But Miguel's head turned by instinct. Inside cell C-12, only one eye was visible through the narrow window, staring straight at him, wide and intense. The inmate spoke in a low voice that didn't match his shouting. Did you drink the milk? Miguel's blood went cold. He couldn't answer. Then the inmate stepped back into the darkness of his cell and slid a small piece of white paper through the food slot. The paper drifted to the ground, landing right at Miguel's feet. The supervisor ordered, "Don't touch it." But Miguel had already seen what was written on it. A single line. "You were supposed to die yesterday." Miguel's breath caught. Before he could say anything, a guard shouted, "He's covering his window." The inmate inside slammed something against the glass. Boom. Guards rushed forward. Alarms started blaring. And in the chaos, the inmate yelled Miguel's name again. But this time, it was filled with fear. "Run!" Then, a full tactical team charged into C range. Later, in a small interview room, Officer Hensley placed a file on the table. Inside were photos of Miguel's breakfast tray and the milk carton with the X. Hensley looked concerned. "This morning," he said softly, "an investigation confirmed an attempt to pass messages through food trays. During a search of Florence's cell, an officer was assaulted." Miguel held his breath. Hensley continued, "You were not the target, but someone tried to use you as a communication point without your permission. So the note." "Yes," Hensley said. "It came from C range." "What about the milk?" Miguel whispered. Hensley paused. "There was no poison, no chemical." Miguel let out a shaky breath. "Then why the X? Why warn me?" Hensley leaned forward. "Because Forson thought you were asking questions about the kitchen. About him. Someone told him you were. Someone who wanted him to react." Miguel felt the puzzle pieces shifting. "So someone set me up," he whispered. Hensley nodded. "And that's why we're ending this today. Ramirez, pack your belongings. You're being transferred out of ADX Florence. Effective immediately." Miguel was shocked. "Transferred? To where?" "Somewhere safer. You won't be in Forson's orbit." As the guards escorted him back to his cell, Miguel packed his few things. Walking down the long hallway toward the exit, he felt the weight of a world he never understood. He came into ADX worrying about violence and isolation. But in the end, the most dangerous part of the world's toughest prison was the food line. The messages hidden in trays. The power held by men locked in cells he never even saw. As the transport van door shut behind him, Miguel finally understood the truth. Inside ADX Florence, every meal had a story. And some stories were never meant to be spoken. Thanks for watching, and subscribe for more stories like this.